Hi, this is Makolas Pokani, the leader and the founder of Church Governance Solutions. I want to speak to pastors today, and I want to speak about those things that pastors are desperate about that makes them vulnerable towards the devil. Those things that pastors are desperate about that make them vulnerable in the ways of God. And this is a topic that is very, very important, and I must really say that because of these things, you may find that many of the pastors, leaders of the church, they become very vulnerable, and the devil attacks them with these particular things because he knows that you are obsessed about these things. He knows that you're desperate about these things, so therefore the devil will forever put them on your table, will forever suggest them to you, because he knows that when he brings that to you, it becomes a very, very serious temptation. And I want to speak about this because it's very important that our pastors are becoming protected of these things so that we can be able to be aware of this and make sure that we become careful when we meet these particular situations. And that's very important that we speak about. The one thing that pastors are desperate about is they become desperate about wealth. They become desperate about money. And this we have seen many pastors becoming desperate about that. To an extent that when you become desperate about that, you become actually a slave of people. And that is why in many churches you'll realize that the rich or wealthy people are promoted quickly to positions of power in a church, to positions of leadership. And mainly it's because of the reason why that the powerful people financially, pastors relate with generally because they are giving the money. And some pastors that are desperate about money, therefore, they will only befriend those people that are rich and therefore undermine those that are poor amongst their congregation. And this is very important, and I must emphasize this, that I'm saying this carefully because I know it may offend the listeners, which are the ministers of the gospel, who may say, no, I relate with the rich people in my church because they help my vision to progress. Yes, they help your vision to progress, but it's a fine line between you being desperate for wealth yourself. It's a fine line between you being desperate for money yourself, because when you become desperate for money yourself, you become desperate for wealth yourself, then it becomes problematic because you are actually becoming vulnerable, and the devil may actually run you into whereby you are led by the very same rich people that may not live the life of God, that may actually not want you to preach about their lives or to speak about things that affect them. And they may channel you in a way that you think that you're still on the right path, but it's because of the desperation of money and wealth that has drifted you away from the actual calling and direction of your vision. And you are missing it because it is that which that you are led by the fact that you are actually led by money because you're desperate for money. And this is very important, and I'm emphasizing this because I've seen people that are actually led into desperation of money, and they've missed quite a lot because they're desperate about money, and therefore they miss a lot of things. And I want to emphasize that please don't be desperate for money. Don't be desperate for wealth as well, as a pastor, as a leader, because that will make you vulnerable. Secondly, desperation for fame. We have seen this happening. When a pastor or a minister of the gospel become desperate for fame, they can do anything, anyhow and anywhere, because they're desperate to be famous. They're desperate to be known. And that is why some get invited into even places where the people there don't even believe in God. They are invited onto platforms that bring shame to the kingdom. They are invited in platforms that are contrary to the word of God, just because they're desperate to be famous. On a platform that is exposing actually negatively the word of God or the church of God, people go there. You are a leader, you go there because you are actually desperate for money. I have seen actually people that want to be famous and go to even wrong places. I have seen ministers of the gospel go into nightclubs, and they go in there maybe to go and motivate people. And you are invited to come and do motivational speaking there and so on. And you go there and motivate people that are drunk. People that are, in a nightclub where you are actually getting involved and hooked to that. And next time you go there, you're not invited to motivate people. You're going there yourself. And that's very important, that you are able to discern places where you can go and places that you may not go. Because remember, there are places that you can go as a man and woman of God. There are places that you may not go. And this is very important that we emphasize that. And I must really say, when you are desperate for fame, sometimes your eyes close and you find yourself going to places that you may not be needing to go. And be careful of that, because that's very important that you're aware of that and you don't run yourself into trouble of following things that you may not need to follow. And that's very important that you become careful of that. So I'm emphasizing this. I'm saying, as a man and woman of God, don't be desperate for fame at all, because you may do things that are wrong and thinking that they will make you famous. And you may actually go to initiation of some platforms or altars that are evil, sometimes for the fame's sake. We have seen many people that are desperate for fame going into initiation into wrong altars, and they think that it is okay. But listen to this, it becomes a desperation of fame that leads you to that. The other thing that some pastors are desperate about is desperation for power. Desperate for power, desperate to become a powerful person. And therefore, in this case as well, we've seen people that are initiated to wrong altars, that will go to the underground and world, where they're initiated to wrong things of the evil underworld, and they want to become powerful. And therefore, they go anywhere. They fly anywhere to different countries that will initiate them to wrong things and Satanism, for instance, and because they want to have powers of some sort. And those people that want to have powers, they will tell you that when I swing or wave my hand like this, everybody will fall down. And because they want that as if it's a form of power, they would actually go to anywhere. They would actually pay money sometimes even for things that are not godly in order to have power or to show as if they've got power. And this is very key, that I want to urge pastors and the preachers of the gospel that please be careful not to be desperate for power, because desperation for power has got a tendency as well of misleading people and making you to do things that may not be done, things that are dangerous for you to do, and therefore be careful of that. Please, as a pastor, don't be desperate for power at all. There are those that are desperate for to lead multitudes of people, desperate for a number of people to step to bigger stages and so on. Those are that are desperate for big congregations, mega churches and so on. Desperate. And I'm mentioning the word desperate because when you are desperate, it's different than desiring. Because somebody may just desire to have a mega church. There's nothing wrong about that. Somebody may dream actually to preach to multitudes of people. There's nothing wrong with that. But when you become desperate of that, anything can happen, and you may do anything that is untoward, anything that is of the devil, anything that is not of God, and in order to become somebody who's leading multitudes. And be careful of that. And I'm mentioning this because we have seen people that are desperate for power as well, that would go around also desperate to become leaders of multitudes and to stand on bigger platforms, and they will become so desperate to an extent that they undermine people that are running smaller churches. They're undermining people that are addressing smaller numbers of people because they themselves are so desperate, and they would even lie of the number of members in their churches because they would love to tell people as if they're running bigger churches. So that's very, very important that we emphasize that. And please be careful not to become desperate for multitudes. Desperation to perform miracles. We have seen men and women of God becoming desperate to perform miracles. And I must emphasize in advance that miracles are of God and they are not of man. So if miracles are of God, then therefore God will dish out a miracle where it is necessary, where you see it suit or worth putting up a miracle. Because the miracle is not going to happen because you want it to happen. God is going to do a miracle because he wants to do a miracle himself. And that is why God says, I'm blessing whom I want to bless. and I will actually give mercy to those that I give mercy to. So miracles as well. God will perform a miracle to whom he wants to perform miracle to. So therefore you cannot be desperate for miracles to an extent that you perform the so-called miracle monies and the so-called walking in the air and things like that. That's being desperate for miracles. And in so doing, sometimes this is connected to desperate for power. This is also connected to desperate for multitudes. It's desperate to many things, fame as well, wealth as well. And all these things are interconnected. And I'm emphasizing them that you be careful as a man and woman of God, that you're not desperate for all these things, because they will actually drift you away from the ways of God, and you'll make God actually not comfortable or not love you, not favor you anymore, because you would have actually drifted away from him. Now, I want to emphasize that please don't feel desperation to even go to initiate to wrong platforms and altars because you're desperate for money or you're desperate for any of these things that we've mentioned right now, particularly miracles. We have seen people that are desperate for miracles, and therefore, because of that, we have seen people going out of the way as well. There are those that are desperate to expand internationally, and we have seen that happening, where somebody will call themselves international ministers, and of course, they've never been anywhere, even outside the country. They don't even have a passport sometimes, but they call themselves international speakers. Now, this is very, very serious desperation of somebody who would love actually dreams, which is a good thing to dream, dreaming of going overseas and ministering there. But somebody who's desperate for that, you become even a liar sometimes, where you lie as if you've been everywhere else and tell people I've traveled all over the world while you're talking about traveling within your own country only. And that's important that we become careful of that, because your desperation will even make you lie that you're an international speaker. It will make you feel like you are somebody who's a big shot, and while you're not. So please be careful of that. Don't be desperate, because the devil may take advantage to drift you away based on that as well. There's what we call a desperation to be perceived as better than your peers. And that is a very dangerous desperation as well. And we've seen people that are desperate to be perceived as of bigger than their peers. And therefore, they would actually get themselves into debts, and they will actually launch themselves into wrongdoings because they want to compete with their peers that may not even be aware that they're competing with them. Now, your peers are not even aware that you're competing with them, but yet you're competing with them. And that becomes detrimental and dangerous for your own sake. So I want to emphasize that please be careful that you don't become desperate to an extent that you want to compete with your peers that are not even competing with you. They're not even aware, because you launch yourself into debts, you launch yourself into wrongdoings because you want to impress, or you want to actually be seen as better than your peers. So please be careful of that. And I want to end up here today. Right now, your host, Mike Spagani. Thank you very much for listening to us on this one. And I hope it has helped you as well. And you will be able to check with us as we deal with other topics going forward. But be careful that you don't miss to click the notification button on our Facebook page, My Spagani, Facebook page, Church Governance Solutions. Like those pages, and you will be drawn to attention when we have posted videos of teachings there once more. But our YouTube channel, My Spagani as well, go there as well, and subscribe and learn a lot out of our videos that we've posted there in the past. May the good Lord bless you, and allow me to say cheers for now.